And I'd like to welcome everybody back once again to the Buffalo History Channel for another episode of historical Buffalo content. And ladies and gentlemen, you see her. She's here. After you saw Dominique, you knew it was inevitable, right? Ladies and gentlemen, this young lady is certainly has been no stranger to anybody within the past few years. We got in the year of 2021. Everyone got to know this young lady very, very well, as you will best remember her for sending shockwaves through the Buffalo community when she won the mayoral primary in the summer of 2021. But she's no stranger to politics. She prior to her running for mayor, she's been an activist. She's put her time in as an activist in the city of Buffalo, and we're gonna talk about her history as an activist, and we will certainly, yes, we will talk about the mayoral campaign. We will talk all about it. I'm gonna let her just go. She's when I spoke with her on the phone, she says the first thing she says to me is, "I got a story to tell."
I have a story to tell.
There you go. And I said, "Oh boy, oh boy." I think if we got through Dominique, we can get through this one too. But I'd like to welcome the one and only India Walton. Welcome to the Buffalo History Channel.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I have to tell you that this almost really seemed inevitable. And when I say that it seemed inevitable that you'd be on here at some point, it goes all the way back to the, I want to say the early part of, I believe it was 2022, I believe. I got to check back through the video history. We did our very first political story was on the mayoral campaign of Ambrose Lane back in 1969. He was the first black man to actually run for the office of mayor of Buffalo, and it was an unsuccessful campaign, but it was no less a historic campaign. And I had a chance to. He's no longer with us, sadly, but I had a chance to interview his children right here on the platform, and it was a very, very informative interview. And I remember doing an interview prior to that in one of my anniversary shows, and it was right around the time where you would announced your campaign, and then from there it was we talked about I mentioned your campaign, I mentioned Ambrose Lane's campaign, I even mentioned Arthur Eves' campaign, which is another story which will be in the not too distant future on this platform. But I always like to start from the beginning, India. Like I said, you're no stranger to activism. What was it that began it for you? What got you into community activism in the city of Buffalo?
Oddly enough, it wasn't until I was an adult and going through organizing training that I realized how I got my start in activism. My stepfather has been married to my mother for a long, long time, since I was a teenager. And when I was younger, he was incarcerated. He was doing 25 years to life for a drug charge as a result of the Rockefeller drug laws. And my mom would take us up to Albany. We would rally, we would write letters. And eventually the laws were overturned. And my stepfather came home 15 years before he was eligible for parole because of the work that my mother had done. And in hindsight, it taught me that the people that you love and you care about are worth fighting for. Even if it seems like change is a long shot, it's still worth a try when you love and you care about someone. And I think that was like my intro into what it meant. I didn't have the language or the words, but as I got older and became involved in my labor union at work and learned about the work of 1199 SEIU and the civil rights movement and had other opportunities to engage, one of the things that I'm really proud of is that I had an opportunity to go and speak at a rally in front of the Supreme Court when Sebelius versus Hobby Lobby was going on, when Hobby Lobby didn't want to opt into the Affordable Care Act and provide women with reproductive care, right? And at every moment that I had an opportunity to speak up and speak out, I began to just come more into my individual power, but also learn that I am able to set an example for other people to tell their stories and to use the experiences that we've had in our life, whether they be positive or negative or indifferent, as a means to empower other people to really speak up and affect change.
Working through the union, that's a different type of an experience in and of itself, because I mean you're not just fighting, you're not really, it's not really so much fighting for the community, you're basically fighting for your job and can as well as conditions of that of your coworkers. Give our audience an idea of what it's like to be fight in the union as a member of the SCIU.
You know, the interesting thing for me is that I'm a nurse. And at the time when I was a union delegate, I worked at Children's Hospital. And I was one of the only Black RNs in my unit. I worked in a unit in the neonatal intensive care unit. And it was about 160 nurses, and 4 of us were Black. And it was just me on night shift, right? And maybe some float pool folks. So there's an interesting dynamic when we talk about labor unions, because we think of labor unions as social justice organizations today. But when we think back to the origins of labor unions, it was really a method that was used to exclude Black people from fair wages, right? And as time went on, we know that, you know, the civil rights movement sort of changed that, but there is still a legacy that exists. And when we talk about race and class dynamics in the city of Buffalo, no institution is absolved from that. It exists in all places, right? Whether it be covert or overt. When you talk about, you know, the way people are promoted, the treatment in the workplace, I experienced a ton of horizontal violence where I was just as qualified or more qualified than my peers and my colleagues, but I was still a lot of times viewed as lesser. And because I am who I am, I'm gonna call it out. And it makes people uncomfortable. So, you know, I've not always been the favorite of a lot of my colleagues, but I'm okay with that because, like I said, I
That's
am
like,
leaving the legacy for the people who come behind me. And when something is unacceptable, that's just, it is what it is. It's unacceptable, and I have a responsibility to speak up about it.
you you recall any particular stories while you were that yeah, it looks like, sounds like you got a lot of them.
I think one in particular is important for me to tell from my perspective because I hadn't had a chance to really say anything, right?
Okay.
When I was running for mayor, there was a story that came out about me allegedly assaulting a fellow nurse at Children's Hospital, right?
Yep.
So here's the real story, and I'll give you the short version.
Okay.
Um, Many of us at Children's were pursuing bachelor's degrees, right? In order to be an RN, you need an associate's degree, you pass the boards, but we had an opportunity to go back to school. So a few of us in the unit were going back to school together, and we had a group project to do, right? So it was me and a couple of my coworkers in the same group. Um, this particular semester, my marriage began to dissolve. It became very violent. And I not only needed to take a leave of absence from work, but I also was going to withdraw from school. So I let my coworkers and my classmates, their same group of people, I let them know that I would be taking a leave and withdrawing from class, but I was still going to do my part of our group project. So one of the women who I was in the group with, now mind you, we're professionals, we work in a hospital, okay? Nurses are one of the most trusted professions in the world. Rather than her addressing her concerns with me directly, she went to social media and then other nurses chimed in. So I was being bullied on social media by my coworkers.
There's a lot of that going wrong in Buffalo.
Yeah. And this was years ago. This must have been about 10 years ago now. Like this was like when
Oh
it was
wow,
still relatively a newer
new.
thing.
It was new, yeah.
So rather than me publicly address it on the computer, I see this woman at work. And I said, we're adults and we're professionals. And if you have something that you want to say to me, we can talk. And I said it just like that. And she took great offense to it. Now, I told you I was going out on leave because I just had so many personal problems. I needed to take some time to get my life together. So I went out on leave. And when I came back 4 weeks later, human resources came to my bedside as I was doing vitals on my patient and told me that they had to walk me down to security because there was a warrant for my arrest. It turns out that this woman went down to court to get an order of protection against me. And when I was sent the notice to appear, it went to the house of my ex-husband. So I was never notified. So I had a bench warrant. So, yes, Buffalo police came to my job and took me to jail. I sat for maybe 6 hours down there. I stood in front of Judge Ogden. It was, just stay out of her way. Don't get in any trouble. I wanted it to be over with, so I didn't fight. I just took it on the chest. But when I tell you, it's the first time I'd ever been arrested. They took me down there. I was violated, humiliated. I mean, squat and cough, the whole nine. They took my shoelaces, cut the strings out of my scrub pants. It was really a sobering experience for me because we think that when you reach a certain social status, I'm a registered nurse, I'm a respected professional, and my coworker can go and tell a lie that gets me arrested. And now I'm the one who has to suffer the consequences of that. And there's no accountability on her part. And then many years later, the story is told from an anonymous source. It's printed in the news. And now the perception is that I'm some kind of criminal and felon and welfare queen, and every single negative stereotype and trope they could use against me as a very highly educated and capable Black woman. They reduced my entire existence to this incident that made people believe that I was some sort of violent, angry criminal who goes around beating people up. So yeah, that's the story.
Yeah. Coming out of the professions that I work in, it can get a little messy like that too. So believe me, I can certainly I can certainly relate. But to move on, I actually met you, and I want to say it might have been 2016 or whenever it was. Uh, I was contracted to I was commissioned to do a job for uh, Open Buffalo. Mark Lamont Hill was in town for a speaking engagement, and we were at. I think we shot. Forgot where we shot. I think it might have been in high school that we shot.
Yep.
Yeah, my alma mater. Of course, not. It's all coming back to me. I'm gonna have to go into the archives and pull the tape when I put this out there. But yeah, that's what that. I think I was there a day before we did the shoot, and that's when I met you, and you all were you and Franchelle and some of the other people were making your plans for things and how you were going to put everything together. And that's when I got a chance to really meet you and some of the other activists and somebody to find out and learn about some of the other activism that you were doing around the city. Could you talk to us about some of the work that you've done with Open Buffalo?
Sure. Open Buffalo was my first organizing job. I think I have an innate and natural ability to organize people and sort of this leadership quality that people see in me. But I had never had a job as an organizer. And, after my experience with Kaleida and Children's Hospital, I was longing to find a place of belonging, and to do work that was really important to me, because I knew that nursing is a great profession, but I wasn't making the impact that I wanted to see. I wanted to see like a real change in my community. And organizing allowed me to do that. So when I worked at Open Buffalo, I was a lead organizer for the Justice and Opportunity table. I worked on criminal legal reform, on bail reform. I worked on the campaign to legalize adult use cannabis in New York State. And around the same time, because I was living in the Fruit Belt, I also worked with residents of the Fruit Belt to establish the parking permit system over there. And we also started Buffalo's first community-led community land trust. So those years were full of both a lot of work, but a lot of lessons and experiences. And I met so many wonderful people. And it was really an aha moment for me about the power of organizing, the power of community building, and the power of holding authentic relationships with folks, and how to do that even when you are holding some tensions and disagreements, and having the relationships that enable you to be able to talk through things and work together with people, even though you might not agree about every single thing. You can still come to agreements about how you want to move the community forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So moving forward in time, the year is 2020. It's close to the summer. And I remember I was planning to come home for vacation. Uh, the world as we knew it had changed.
Mm-hmm.
COVID-19, the pandemic, whatever, that's what was going on. There was a lockdown, everything was closed. And I can remember right before I came home, it would have been on a 2-week vacation. I heard about the story of George Floyd. And immediately after that, demonstrations were happening all across the country. And I can remember this one Saturday, while I was home on my vacation with a serious case of cabin fever, because there was nothing else to do. I see on Facebook that there's plans to hold a rally at City Hall. I scroll a little bit more in the Facebook feed and I see a video from you. And you were tearful. You were almost on the verge of tears, telling people to not participate in that rally or whatever rally, because you felt something was wrong. I'm gonna let you explain what the rest of that story was.
So, first I'll start by saying I'm a mother to 4 sons. And the same love and care that I have for my own family is how I feel about the Buffalo community. And I think that is lost on a lot of people, right? Like, how could someone genuinely be in it for the love of the people and not for selfish gain? Because that's what we're used to.
Sure.
And not only was I watching what was happening on social media, right? And people who I wasn't familiar with, and not saying that like it's for me to determine who's legit and who's not. But I have been in the organizing community for a number of years now. And I mean, like, George Floyd happened, but Wardell Davis happened here. Jose Hernandez Rossi happened here. And I know who was on the front lines organizing. I know who had been organizing against police brutality right here in Buffalo. And none of these people were ever there, right? Y'all been asleep all this time, but now you get national attention and you want to be in front of cameras and whatever else it is. So now you appear out of thin air saying that you're organizing a rally, right? So I'm asking questions like, well, do you have marshals? Do you have legal observers? Do you have medics? How are you going to make sure people are safe? I'm seeing people in the thread saying, well, I'm bringing fireworks. Why are you bringing fireworks to a protest? So people think there's gunshots and the police open fire on people? That doesn't seem responsible. And I'm like, the thing that people don't understand about activism and organizing is that not only it's not about the protest, right? That's a tactic. The goal is what you're asking for. And if you don't have a list of demands, if there's no strategy behind it, we're not going to go outside, scream into the void, cause a big ruckus, all for not. That's not the point. So, like, there was just a real lack of planning and of safety, in my opinion. And I could see young people who were agitated, frustrated, and motivated that were going out there with no direction. No one was in charge. And that is not the way things should be done. I mean, activism be damned. Like, I'll go out there and scream into a bullhorn with the best of them, but it's going to be for a reason. And I would not want to drive young people out into the streets if I knew that I could not make sure that they were going to be safe.
Yeah, I can just remember whenever I've talked about the story, it was really unbelievable to me, not because I haven't seen anything go to that level before, at least for my years. I had not just because I had done a recently up to that right before that had released a documentary on the 1967 Buffalo uprising that happened on the East Side.
Mm-hmm.
But it was something. It was like something. I think on one hand, I thought it. I may have thought from a distance it was necessary because I kind of feel you initially feel like it's about time that somebody shakes something up, but at the same time, my not there. But I also had to take into consideration my not being there and not knowing everything that was going on in there at in Buffalo while I was all the way back here in the DMV and seeing what were behind some of these marches because it brings to mind when I would go out to film some of the demonstrations out here between Prince George's County and in Washington D.C. And I've told this story before that when I would go, I would hear about notifications on Facebook about they're having certain demonstrations down there, and I would go down there with my camera and do some documenting. And the first thing I would get down there, I'm looking for all the black people. I'm walking down there like John Travolta in Pulp Fiction. And I remember going to one such demonstration in DC, and I look over to see some fraternity brothers, and oh, am I at the right demonstration? And it's like, yeah, we said we were thinking the same thing, but it was just something very unusual, that broad of a section of people in there. And then to find out that there might have been different agendas behind it.
Yeah. I mean, it was a very particular moment in time. And like you said, you had cabin fever, right? Like
Yeah.
folks were out of work, out of school, people were looking for something to do. And now, we had seen Trayvon Martin, we saw Michael Brown, and now it's in front of us on our television screens, and I think that it allowed space for people who are normally distracted with their day to day, who had to just sit in it and feel it, to be like, wait a minute, like what are we gonna do? Like, how are we gonna fix this? And I think that it also compelled a lot of folks from outside of the Black community to really be able to feel the plight that we're actually
That
and
too.
that we've been experiencing for a long time.
Yeah, there were those that were certainly in the fight with us. One of the most astounding things that stood out to me, particularly during the Buffalo unrest, because it was almost like a long hot summer all over again for Buffalo, because they kept those demonstrations. Whoever was in charge of them things certainly kept that going literally throughout the entire summer with the marches. Uh, there was a march on the mayor's home. There was a big march on Hurdle Avenue where they got into it with one of the bar owners out there. And then of course there was the other one, the demonstration that was on Bailey Avenue, where one of the officers got ran over. And it was I don't think I've ever I wondered to myself, where in the world did Buffalo get all this energy? It's like I was there for 25 years of my adult life and ain't never seen a turn up like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it came from sheer frustration, right?
Yeah,
And then there was also, were people who have different philosophies about how change is created, right?
true.
Some people are more agitational, some people are more educational, some people want to pray about it. So we have people
Yeah,
that's like, we going to the mayor's house. I'm like, I'm not going to the mayor's house because guess what? I don't want nobody coming to my house. Right. So if that's your strategy, y'all go do that. I'm not getting involved with that. I'm not coming to the prayer vigil because that's that like thoughts and prayers is what got us here. We don't have enough action, right? I
well,
don't want to do that. You know what I mean?
that's what we would normally see.
Right. Like I'm trying to shake something up to get to decision makers, to bring them to the table, to talk about how we pass policy and reform. That's what I'm interested in. You know what I mean? So, a lot of the folks that I was organizing with, we, like I said, we had marshals and medics and legal observers. We did teach-ins before any demonstration where we didn't allow people to just come in and talk and then we go in march. No, we're gonna have a sit down, have yourself a water and some snacks, and we're gonna talk about the history of policing in America. We're gonna talk about the problems with Buffalo Police Department. We're gonna talk about the lack of accountability out of BPD, how the police union affects that, what the mayor can do, what the common council can do, what tools already exist that are not being utilized, and what tools we've been asking to be implemented for the last 2 or 3 years. Like I said, I worked with Open Buffalo's Just an Opportunity Table. We presented the city of Buffalo with 32 policy recommendations that they could have done at the local level before any of this jumped off. Body cameras, stop receipts, a police advisory board with independent oversight. Like we did surveys and had all of these recommendations that came down, and no one listened until the governor threatened to pull state aid. Right? Like the foundation was already there. I think that we really did a good job and needed to do an even better job of educating people about the foundation that had already been laid. But because, like I said, people are so caught up in the day-to-day grind that they're not paying attention to what items are on the Common Council agenda. This gave people space to wake up and really notice the failures in the leadership of our city.
Yeah. So as we move ahead to the year of 2021, many young people, which was it was actually that was probably the most refreshing thing to see out of those movements, was that a number of young people like yourself emerged from that and were desirous to have change in the city and decided to take the next step and run for office. You know, yourself, Dominique Calhoun, Miles Carter all ran for office. I already had Dominique on. So you decided to run for mayor. What was it what brought that on?
It was several things, right? So um I mean, it begins back to my days as an organizer, working both on um the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act and asking the mayor to sign on to it, and his refusal, and saying things like, if people don't want to get arrested, they should pull up their pants and stop smoking, right? And I'm like, but what I'm trying to say to you is that white folks and Black folks consume cannabis at the same rates, but 80% of the arrests that are made are Black people. That is a problem, right? But I couldn't get through to him, right? And thinking about, wanting to build affordable housing in the Fruit Belt and having the barrier to being able to accomplish that. We had raised more than $1 million and the city wouldn't sell us the land to build houses on. And it's just like everything that we try to do that's positive, that really is the responsibility of this administration and our legislative body, the Common Council, was really their responsibility. You have everyday average people coming up with great solutions, and the barrier to getting anything done comes out of City Hall. And I think the pin that made it so that I knew I had to do something was when Cortland Renford threw a trash can that was lit on fire through a window in City Hall.
Oh, yeah.
And our Black mayor got on national television and said, "We have you on camera, you idiot, and we're going to prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law." Cortland was 19 years old. The brain of a child at 19 is not fully formed. And that kid deserved some grace while he's watching people who look like him be slaughtered on his television screen. And rather than our leader, the leader of the second largest city in Buffalo, a Black man, calling him in, he's degrading him on national television. And I didn't like that at all. And I said, somebody has to do something. This man thinks that he's untouchable. We've been organizing for a whole year. We have all these young and old, Black, white, English speaking, non-English speaking immigrants and refugees, people from all over who've been coming together, marching, saying we need change. What are we going to do? And they still had energy. We were still in a pandemic. But now the protests are sort of, fading away. Let's take that power from those protests and turn it into political power. Let's teach these people how to knock doors. Let's teach these people how to make phone calls. Let's teach these people how to run field campaigns. We had people who already had their own talents in graphic design and, all these different artistic things that people needed somewhere to put that energy. And what better way to use that energy to catalyze it than a run for mayor?
So when we talk about the support, the base of support that you had, we get that it came out of the movement with the young folks and and you mentioned some of the immigrants that were out there. Gonna have to put, I guess I may have to put on a journalist hat for this question. It is a fair question to ask. As a obviously a Black woman, what support did you get a lot of support from other Black women in the city?
Um, I'm trying to think so that I can give an accurate
Okay.
recount, because the way my campaign looked
Mhm.
was a lot different after I ran the primary than before, right?
Okay.
Even when we look at the results of the primary election and what my base was pre-primary, it changed after the primary. So prior to the primary, and before I say anything else, I'll preface it with this. There are people in this city and in this world who have the privilege of leisure, who have money to donate, who have skills that they're willing to give pro bono or in kind, who have the mental space to think about things. And there are others who do not. So prior to the primary, I formed a coalition of the could, right? Can you? Everybody was invited, but we knew that we didn't have no money. I'm a first-time political candidate. The moment I said I was running for mayor, I got fired from my job. So now not only am I first-time political candidate, but now I'm also unemployed. I didn't have money to pay staff. Our campaign up until the primary was 100% volunteer. Nobody got paid. And the things that we did pay for were things that we really didn't have any choice to pay for. My media was not paid. My photographer worked in kind. Shout out to Nate Piercini. He did all my photos, all my videos, all our social media content. All of that was done with the talents that people gave to the campaign because they believed in what we were doing. And I wish that I had more photos of what poise looked like on primary night. It was me and a handful of my volunteers who went out to watch the polls and tell people to vote for me. And once the results started rolling in was when that room filled up.
I want to I have to interject this part since you mentioned that, because I can remember being, well, not really at home, but at my parents' house watching it. And when it was, and I remember specifically because it was the day before I was to drive back here to the DMV and get back on the road. And I knew that the primary and stuff was going on, and I I think I know I, along with a lot of people, when let me just put it to you. You were at Poise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're there on the night of the primary, and you're with all your supporters, and you're watching the TV and you're watching the returns and the results come in, and all of a sudden, the results, it says India Walton, winner of the mayoral primary. What was it that went through your mind at that specific moment that we saw you on that tape and that video celebrating?
Holy crap.
I think a lot of people, so I think we all said that. I think the entire city just blurted out a collective, "Oh shit."
I can tell you, I wanted to win. I wanted to win so bad. I ate, breathed, lived that campaign. There was nothing that you could have asked me about Buffalo that I didn't know. Right. And what I want people to know is that I didn't just run out of frustration. I also knew that we had $350 million coming from the federal government and American Rescue Plan money that we could have done some transformative things with. And I knew, because I was also a first-time executive director of a brand new startup nonprofit. And the person that mentored me told me, in order to be an executive, you don't have to know everything. You have to be wise enough to put the right people around you. And I was more than prepared to put the right people around me. I had conversations with people that you would not even believe. Former Buffalo PD police chiefs, former deputy mayors, like you name it. I spoke to everybody who would take my call about what it would take to turn the city around. And I think that is how my base of support became as broad as it was. But I took this race very serious. And the fact that the mayor refused to debate me, refused to even acknowledge that I was running, I went to one of his confidants before I announced, and I said, I just want you to know that I'm going to run for mayor. And he said, that's cute, but nobody even knows your name. He said, Byron has been in office for 16 years. Nobody knows you. And I left out of there and I said, nobody knows my name. So I have to make sure that everyone knows my name. This campaign has to be big. I have to take it and make it bigger than Buffalo, because who cares about who the mayor of Buffalo is? Nobody cares about who the mayor of Buffalo is, right? So I have to position myself with the ultra progressives, with the AOCs, with the Cori Bushes, and get the attention of people who support progressive politics. And like that is what brought a lot of other people into the campaign and to the table, and that's how it got to be as big as it was.
Yeah, that was surprising. As I was observing it from where I was in Maryland, out of the city. It was surprising. I'm looking at it from my vantage point, saying, "Goodness gracious, Buffalo is back in the spotlight again." Because I'm seeing, as you said, AOC and Cori Bush, and I saw all these other people out, all these people outside the city coming to coming to support your campaign. And Buffalo is back in the spotlight again. It's like the second year in a row, and I know I mentioned something about your support, and it seemed like it came surprisingly. You had a lot of people that were backing you. Now, you said that things changed after the primary, and even from where I sat and observed, things got real. It got realer than real. People did not take well to you winning that primary, and I know Dominique has shared some stories. You shared some experiences with me when we talked on the phone. Um, what was Talk about your campaign in the aftermath of that primary win?
Yeah, I wanted to win really bad, but I think realistically, the team that I had um, pre-primary, like we were not prepared for the weight of what was going to happen after, right? For some reason, I thought that if we won the primary, then Byron was gonna concede and like help me transition into office and be nice about it. I don't know why I thought that. Like I thought that like, okay, like this is democracy. This is how it works, right? We're a Democrat city. There's no Republican. If I win the primary, I am the presumptive mayor and I'm gonna have the cooperation of the current administration. Um but for him to not only wage this write-in campaign, but also to do it in such a way where like he was trying to use the courts, to get a ballot line when deadlines had passed and like just circumvent the system and recreate the rules, was nasty work. I think a lot of the way that myself and my staff was treated was just like unnecessary. um, we had an office at Hansa on Ellicott Street. And after the primary, he moved his office across the street from mine. So every day I would come into my campaign office and there would be people standing across the street scowling at us or, just like making it uncomfortable. Working in collusion with Republicans and just, people from my own community who know me and know me well, who were saying things about me that they knew just weren't true in order to take away all of our hard work and diminish the accomplishment of us not only winning the primary but doing it convincingly and also like mobilizing a base of apathetic voters. Like there were people who voted for the first time to vote for me, right? Like we registered Benny the Butcher to vote, who never voted before because he was coming
I
to
saw that.
get involved. You know what I mean? Like people who felt like they didn't have a place in the political process were now engaged and activated and motivated, and they took that away. And what I alluded to earlier was like, when I ran in the primary, I won like Delaware, Niagara, like white middle class college educated people, right? After the primary, I won in I won the general election in the mayor's home district. I lost the general, right? Because Chris Scanlon delivered South Buffalo to him. And I think a lot of people, like I said, felt like if I won the primary, I was the presumptive nominee. So a lot of people just didn't come out to vote again in the general election. But after I won the primary, when I got into the East Side and into the hearts and minds of people who live here, who grew up with the same struggles that I grew up with, and they saw the things I was going through, like, wait a minute, her car got towed for parking tickets. That happens to us every day in this community, because if I have to choose between paying some parking tickets, which are unjust to begin with, and feed my kids, guess which I'm going to choose? So I think that my story resonated with a lot of people. And, to this day, I go out on Jefferson Ave on Friday nights and people are like, you still my mayor. Like, a lot of people are still hurt. During the debates, we talked a lot about whether taxes had to be raised or not. Now taxes have been raised not only once, but twice. More than I said that they needed to be raised. The state of the city is not good. We are barreling toward a fiscal crisis. They're like, now they're saying that he's not even likely to finish out this term.
I remember one of those debates. It was the one that you had. It was the one that you had right before I was to come back in that September of that year. You were at the Meriwether Library, and I remember seeing this image online. 'Cause I watched I know the Association of Black Journalists did sponsored that, and I remember seeing that image online of uh, the mayor's supporters on Byron Brown supporters on this side, India Walton supporters on this side, having a having, I won't want to call it a shouting match, but they were everybody was out there,
Yeah.
and it was very spirited. It was also I also remember that as being a very spirited debate.
I think it was as spirited as it could have been. I still, struggle with whether I should have accepted it or not. Because at that time, when I agreed to the debate, none of the other people on the debate stage were on the ballot. It was just me. I was the only one on the ballot.
Wow.
And, I wasn't given the courtesy of getting a response from him before the primary. But now that you lost because you failed to run a campaign, you want an opportunity to debate. And I still maintain I won that debate. There wasn't too many. I mean, I think the most clever thing he said was like, he talked to young people and I have no street cred, which I don't even know what that means. Like,
there's this one thing that I just can't. I'm sorry, I just can't get this out of my head. I interviewed Dominique Calhoun's interview, and I gotta ask you about this. Somebody threw hot coffee in your face.
Not in my face.
Okay.
Threw it at me. It splashed on my clothes. So, and this wasn't even in Buffalo. I was in the plaza on Niagara Falls Boulevard, and this was even after the election happened. I had lost already at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I was Christmas shopping.
Oh, okay.
And I go out and people do double takes. They look at me and I know that they recognize me. So I never know whether they're looking because they hate my guts or whether they admire me and want to say hi. So I always speak. And I'm like, hey, and they're whispering to each other. It's a couple. They're whispering to each other, and I can hear the wife say, "That's her. That's India Walton." And I said, "It is." So they go get in the car, and I'm walking down the plaza to the next door, and the husband chucks the coffee out of the window at me. But I mean, I've had people show up to my home. I've had people follow me through the mall, like just follow me around, calling me names. And I can say that every time I've had a negative experience with a person in public, it has been a middle-aged white man. And, you know, I had a conversation with some of the men in our community who are in positions of power. And I expressed to them that they opened the door to allow for people to believe that they can disrespect me and treat me in this way, and almost bordering on violence. Because if I'm disrespected and unprotected by members of my own community, if you are the better candidate, then you can stand on your record. You don't have to attack me. Don't tear me down. Don't speak about me negatively on in the news. Like, don't do that. You know what I mean? You use words to describe me like dangerous. That's what you're saying out of your mouth in the media, for people to then go out and repeat and believe that somehow I'm a dangerous person. I just think a lot of it was out of line, and is not the way that we should treat people, even if they are our political adversaries. I'm still a human being. I have a family. I have children. You know, my son is 14 now, so he was what, 11, 12 at the time. Imagine my 11-year-old see all of this playing out. Imagine him going to school and children saying things to him about what they heard their parents say about me, or what they saw in the news, or what's being said about me on social media. I don't think that people realize what a sacrifice it was for me to put not only myself out there, but my family, right? And I'm having a pep talk with my mom and my siblings, and I'm saying, people are going to talk stuff about me. Don't say nothing.
I was going to ask you about how did that impact on your family?
It was rough. It was rough. You know, I think my mom was in like Facebook jail a few times. But you know, I had to tell them that they know me better than anyone. And these people who are saying these things, and they still do. It's been 3 years now, and people still have the audacity to like inbox me or post things that are just like not even based in fact, right?
People carry grudges in Buffalo. Trust me, I know.
For a long time, but even people who are not from here,
right,
who don't know me at all, who've never met me, you know? So I tell my family, and particularly my children, you know me. You know what I'm like. You know whether these things are true or not true. These people don't know me. Many of them have never met me. And a lot of people that I meet now after it's all over are like, I wish I would have met you before. You're actually a nice person. And I'm like, go figure. Like, you know, I think that like a lot of the way that I was portrayed, like I said, was unfair and unjust. And, you know, I'll tell a story or two here or there, but I try not to dwell too much on it because I don't want to seem bitter. I'm not. It was a wonderful experience. I met so many great people, but it's unfortunate that it turned out the way that it did, and our city is still in the state that it's in after all of these years of leadership out of the current administration. But you know, all that I can do now is try and be as effective as I can. When I can, I help. When I can't, I don't. But like I said, I'm putting all of my energy right now into my family and into my future grandchild, and just trying to have some joy.
Lastly, just hypothetically speaking, let's say you did get into office. What would have been your first order of business? Would it have been to make people reapply for their jobs?
You know,
I don't know why I had to throw that in.
Here's the funny part though, Doug, because Just a few months ago,
Mhm.
it came out that the city had a woman on their payroll that collected $500,000 in salary and ain't been to work in 4 years. Right? So the fact that I'm saying we need to audit the departments and make sure people are showing up to work and actually doing their jobs. If you come to work and you're doing your job, I have no problem with you. Far be it. Okay. And this is the problem. Because what kind of idiot do you think I am that I would come to City Hall and on day one just fire everybody? How would the city run? Like
Yes.
clearly there needs to be staff. Clearly there are people who have been in their positions longer than the mayor has even been in office, who know how things need to be done, that do a great job, that I would keep on. But as for the people who don't show up to work, as for the people who have been on administrative leave, as for all of these open positions that need to be eliminated so the city could be in a better fiscal position, those are conversations that should be being had and should be being had in a transparent way that the public is aware of, because we are paying these salaries. We talk about why we can't get roads fixed and amenities and sidewalks and curbs and stop signs and traffic lights and things like that. We don't have a tax base because y'all got 75% of the people that's on a city payroll going and taking their money to Amherst, Cheektowaga, Williamsville. Let's be real about it. Y'all feeding off the teat of the city and the handful of taxpayers that live here. You can come here and work and take our money back out to the suburbs, but you don't want to have any accountability when it comes to investing in the place that's paying your bills and taking care of your family.
So I know. I mean, I jokingly said that. But seriously, what would have been one of you? What would have been one of the first things that you would have wanted to do had you become mayor of Buffalo?
My number one priority in my 100-day plan was to host town halls in every single neighborhood and ask people what they want, to create community boards so that people can decide in their neighborhoods for themselves what it is that they need, because there's not a magic paintbrush where you can have one initiative, because what people need in North Buffalo is different than what people need in Broadway Fillmore. And even though the Fillmore district is Broadway Fillmore and Allentown, the people in Allentown don't have the same needs as the people in Broadway Fillmore. And we have to be real about these conversations. Like I said, we had $350 million coming from the Fed. We could have created so much affordable housing. We could have piloted a universal basic income program to get people who are in this benefits cliff position where they make just enough money to make it, but not enough money to make it up and out. You know, how we get them into home ownership, how we get them into affordable, stable housing, how we address our lead crisis so our babies stop being poisoned. We're blaming the parents and the teachers for a lack of educational attainment when these kids are out here with high lead levels. We have children with lead levels that are comparative and worse than the city of Flint, Michigan. We have serious infrastructure and basic problems that no one is addressing because they're too busy playing politics and favorites. And when you look at the people that supported the mayor in that write-in campaign, it's all the usual suspects. It's people that's on the city payroll or that's being bankrolled or funded somehow by the city, while we still have some of the highest rates of poverty in the nation, oldest and most decrepit housing stock. They play in our face, Doug. They're playing in our faces.
Moving on, as we move on now to the following year of 2022,
Mhm.
we had not one but two tragic occurrences. The first was May 14th, 2022. Uh, there was a mass shooter had made his way into the top supermarket on Jefferson Avenue, shot several people, killed 10 people, 10 souls that we lost on that day. Um, India, share with us, our audience, your memories of that fateful day of May 14th, and where were
Mhm.
you at when that happened?
I was at Shoshone Park at my son's baseball game, and I was with my cousin who's always on Facebook, and she said, "They saying check on your people because somebody shot cops." And I said, "Facebook is not news." And then my phone started ringing, and people were texting and calling and saying, "Something happened on Jefferson. Where are you?" Um, and at first, I didn't want to go. Um, I was feeling like I don't need to keep trying so hard to insert myself into every issue this city has. Um, and then I saw images from Jefferson Avenue, and I saw how devastated people were. Um, I just had to go, and honestly, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have anything to offer, right? Like, I'm not the mayor at this. I'm just India. I don't know what I can do, but I chose to be present. Um, and I had met some folks while I was campaigning in Queens that have a bus. Um, it's called the Peace Mobile, and they do therapy, massages, sound baths, therapeutic interventions, and they usually bring the bus to the scenes of violent crimes in Queens. But I called my friend who runs the program and I said, something has happened in Buffalo and we're going to need some help. So they came and they brought the bus and they brought counselors to talk to people. And I tried to connect folks with resources as best as I could, but it was a rough time. And the following morning, before I knew the names of the victims, I was on Democracy Now, and the host had read the names, and that was how I found out. I found out on a syndicated news show that my friend Kat Massey was a victim. Um, it was
Well,
it
I
was
knew her as well.
it was tough, and it still is. Um, and every year that we commemorate it, every year that passes, I think about my initial reaction, which was I want to see what happens when the cameras go away. And I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be like that. But it's been 2 years and there's still not another grocery store. In fact, Save a Lot in the Broadway Market now is closing. Um,
Oh yeah.
you know, we have all of the warm and fuzzy things to say about Buffalo Strong and Buffalo Love, and then we don't see any material changes, right? Like all of this money and funds were raised, and there's not much different when you walk down Jefferson Avenue today than it was 2 years ago, and it's just sad. It's really really sad.
Later that year, towards the end of that year, um, in in both in that instance and another instance, I swear to God, it's like every time some one of these things happens, it's like I'm either in Buffalo or getting ready to come back to Buffalo. But I remember December of that year, uh, we had a we had a blizzard, and
Hmm.
it was in interestingly enough, I was supposed to come home for the very first time since I had been gone to actually spend Christmas with my family since I had relocated. And the day before is when all the snow came, and I wasn't able to fly back. And then later on, I started hearing that there was that it was a lot more severe than I previously thought it was. And then there were so many deaths that occurred during that storm. Can you share with us some of your memories of the blizzard of 2022?
Yeah. So I lost power pretty early on in the storm, and I was gonna go to my sister's house. She had power. I was gonna leave, and me and my boys went and got in my car, and I got all-wheel drive. I was like, I got a Subaru. We can get through anything. Nope, couldn't get anywhere. So I closed the. I live in the old Hamlin Park house, so we got the French doors that close. I closed the French doors, and we were heating the house with the oven, which ain't the safest thing, but what can you do? And I'm looking through the glass at the thermostat. It was 35 degrees in my house. It was 35 degrees in my house. But we are very privileged. We live across the street from Canisius. Canisius opened their doors so that we were able to walk across the street, charge phones, warm up, fellowship with neighbors. It was a lot of people over there with dogs, babies. It was like I wish that every neighborhood had access to something like that. And in the meantime, my Twitter name is the Hood 211, and I changed it to that because everybody's got my number. People call me, email me, DM me when something is wrong. They don't know what I can do, but they know I might have an idea. So people are calling me. My mom needs to get to dialysis. I don't know how to get her there. Or I'm in the house with the baby. We don't have no formula, no diapers. Or, I lived in an apartment building and it's raining inside the apartment building, a pipe burst or something, and it's just like these are the calls that are coming into my phone. So I'm sort of acting as like a triage, and using my network and resources, because even though a lot of people who are politically connected in Buffalo don't like me, they do respect me. So, I can still call and get someone on the phone and get some motion on some things. So, I spent a lot of my time just doing that, just making phone calls, trying to reassure people. My brother has a plow, so I was sending my brother to go plow out people and check on people and things like that. And it's become just something that I do. It's my natural reaction. I'm a caregiver naturally. So
Yeah, once you're out there, once you put yourself out there like that, you will immediately become a go-to person. I know from my own years of living in Buffalo and being involved in the community, I was in that position many, many times where people had my phone number and were constantly contacting me for stuff. Uh, Moving forward, you are to present day. You are involved in the efforts to restore Humboldt Parkway with the the Kensington Expressway.
mhm.
The fight, you're involved in that fight now, and I can remember the first. The one thing I remember is listening to you and Betty Jean Grant. Shout out to Betty Jean Grant. She was on. The two of you were on WUFO on on a Saturday morning radio show, because when I'm working, I usually tune into the Saturday morning radio shows. And
With
I
Bishop
heard,
Badger.
okay, yeah, right, Bishop Badger. I remember hearing the two of you on his show, and when you were first talking about, that was the first time I heard you all talking about that, because back in, I remember, I just got reminded. That's why the video was on the Buffalo History Channel now. Back in 2014, I was paid to film their holiday. I paid a recorded filmed a number of their meetings when they were talking about it with the Restore Our Communities Coalition, rock organization.
Yep.
And I remember filming a holiday party where they were doing the I Remember campaign. They had a lot of community residents in there, and they were sharing their memories of growing up around the Humboldt Parkway area. Talk. What made you get involved with that, and what's been the progress with that? Because that's been going on a lot this year.
Yeah. So my first introduction to Restore Our Community Coalition was actually when I was living in the Fruit Belt, because, you know, the 33 cut the Fruit Belt in half. So a lot of the story that I would tell about the Fruit Belt all over the country was the creation of the 33 and how it severed Black neighborhoods. So fast forward in 2022, you know, I buy a Hamlin Park house. I live off Humboldt, and I begin to go to stakeholders meetings and ask questions. And I'm like, wait a minute, I thought that the goal was to restore the parkway, because where I live, I'm actually in the project area for the Skajakwita. So they're talking about restoration for us and down that way. But down this way, when you get deeper into the Black neighborhoods, you're talking about making it into a tunnel. So at first they said, okay, we're going to make it into a tunnel, but there's going to be filtration. And then they brought experts in who said filtration is not an option. So what they're going to do is put a cover over it for only 3/4 of a mile. You're leaving all of these other people past Best Street out, and you're going to blow the fumes out of either end, right near the Science Magnet Grammar School and some churches and stuff that's over there on the one end. And then down here on the other end, where the Boys and Girls Club is. And I'm just like, it doesn't really make much sense. Not to mention the maintenance is $5 million a year that has no budget. You don't even know who's going to do it. You said the Olmsted Parks Conservancy was going to do it, but they said that you didn't ask them, right? And all of those issues aside, the position of East Side Parkways Coalition and myself is, y'all didn't even do a full environmental impact statement. It's people in this neighborhood who are sick, who have asthma, heart disease, cancer as a result of this expressway. And you've not done anything to address the harm that has been caused. But then you want to talk to us about environmental and racial justice? Again, they're playing in our faces. Y'all gonna spend $1 billion, and in another 50 years, we're gonna be talking about how it further destroyed the health of our community and reduced life expectancy? Why are we doing it this way? Why do we always have to settle for the least in our community? Why can't Humboldt be like Bidwell? That's how it was originally designed. Oh, because the suburbanites need to get in and out of the city quickly, when it really only adds 4 minutes to their commute for them to take Genesee Street or Broadway.
Yeah, I can remember. I got to definitely give a shout out to Channel 2. They did a piece back in February on the legacy, and I had not really had my eye on that whole Humboldt Parkway and Kensington Expressway thing. I got to be honest about it. And they were some of the images that they showed, because I'd all not like a lot of people. I had always heard stories. I've heard the stories from my mother about, because she grew up in that, lived in that. Her and my grandmother lived in that neighborhood. Grandparents lived in that neighborhood, and they would always talk about how beautiful it was. And they showed some pictures on that show that just literally blew me out of my seat. I'm like, oh my god! I mean, you had pictures where you had a pathway going straight towards the you had a row of houses going straight towards the Museum of Science.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, and then you see the pictures of how they're digging up the area, and it's just like, oh my god, I had no idea. What's the, and so I really hadn't had my eye too much on it, and And I hear stories or see postings about it on Facebook here and there. Um, where's everything at currently with? Because I know I hear the governor, everybody talking. Where are we at currently with that, with this whole thing?
Well, the Department of Transportation, along with the governor and a lot of the other political supporters of the project, want to get shovels in the ground as early as this fall. But there have been a number of lawsuits filed that challenge not only the process of public input, but also the lack of an environmental impact statement. And it also is not in accordance with the Community Climate and Leadership Act, the New York State's own law that mandates that we reduce carbon emissions. So there obviously is legal recourse there, because not only is there a class action with individuals from the neighborhood, but the New York Civil Liberties Union has also brought suit against the State Department of Transportation. So we'll see what happens with that. I think that my highest aspiration moving forward is that our community is aware of what this project actually means for the neighborhood that surrounds it in the city of Buffalo as a whole. But also like takes our power back, right? Like I feel like a lot of people are waiting for things to be done to us, and feel sort of powerless to speak up and speak out about things. But we don't have to accept what's offered to us all the time. Like there are alternatives that we should be exploring.
We'll see. We shall see.
We'll see.
So before we close out, what else is India involved with these days, other than with working with the Parkway?
Yeah, I'm a senior strategist with National Roots Action. So it's a digital organizing platform. I do fundraising, organizing, media. Right now, my primary role is to protect the squad, the 12 members of Congress who vote as a progressive bloc. So that's exciting. It's soul stirring work to still be involved and engaged politically with folks who are aligned with my values. And like I said, I'm going to be a grandma. I'm just enjoying.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Just enjoying my family and travel and eating good food and just being happy, fluttering about the world.
If there's what would you, in closing, what would you have to say to, if there's a young person out there that's aspiring to get into activism, and with everything that you've been through, what would you have to tell them?
Do what you love, and if it's the right thing to do, you have every right to do it. There are some people who don't like some things I have to say, but I can tell you that I always sleep good at night, knowing that what I do and say always comes from here. It always comes from a place of deep care and concern for my community. So as long as you're doing what you feel is right, you should do it.
All right, India. It was a pleasure to have you on the Buffalo History Channel.
Likewise.
All right.